tutorial we're going to get straight into colour grading and colour correction using some stock B-roll footage from a wedding I filmed last year, and we're going to look at all the different ways you can stylize this footage and look at it in comparison to some footage or how I graded it originally, and really sort of show you how you can enhance your style with colour grading as a technique. We're also going to be looking at vector scopes, waveform monitors, and other colour grading tools which are going to help you really understand how the colour matrix is working, and also to show you how every monitor you work on can be slightly calibrated slightly differently, and that can sometimes affect the output at the end. But using these waveform monitors and colour grading monitors, you should be able to minimise that so that the output looks exactly how you expect it to look. So that's quite an advanced feature which we'll get into in a little bit. So I've selected this footage of the church already in my source monitor, and I've just marked an in and out point where I thought the scene looked the best, and I'm just going to drag that straight into my sequence, my timeline. Right, so we have our footage playing here. That looks fine, looks acceptable. Just going to zoom back a little bit here and find out why that's not fitting. Okay, we're back in action. Okay, so imagine I've put together a sequence and I'm ready to start colour grading. Let's get straight into it. We're going to use Premiere Pro's docs up here to change the layout slightly. I'm just going to close this panel. I believe yours will look something like this, and you've got your luminetry colour scopes on the right hand side here. This is where we're predominantly going to be using the colour correction tools today. You've also got them over here in your video effects panel. You'll notice when we do add some colour grading to that, you'll see a luminetry effect will appear on here, and yeah, this is the colour grading layout. It's quite nice. If you've got a larger monitor, you can start undocking things, moving it around, etc. to suit yourself. So we want to get straight into here and see what we can do. Now, using luminetry colour, you get options. Starts off with the basic correction. You get options such as input LUT. Now a LUT, it stands for lookup table, and this is another word for preset. If you want to take the easy route to stylize your footage with an Instagram filter, etc., you can find a LUT online, download it, and apply it to your film stock. Now, I've never really got on with LUTs purely because I like to add my own style. If you like LUTs, that's fine. If you want to have a play with this, you can see how it will affect your footage by clicking on certain lookup tables. So these are all professional grade lookup tables if you're using an Arri Alexa or a Phantom. So that would be for the camera that's on the Phantom drones. But as you can see, it's not really doing anything for me. So I'm just going to click none. We're just going to start colour grading exactly how we like. Now, because we're using a flat colour profile, if I start messing around with temperature, it's not really going to, or shouldn't really affect anything. We won't really be able to see much at this stage. So that we know that the white balance is correct, what I'm going to do is turn on a few of the scopes so we can see what they're telling us. Now, a scope is a colour grader or a colourist's way of digitally seeing what colours are happening within this scene. So I'm going to turn on my scopes. Firstly, to do this, you go down to Window and you scroll down to Luminetry Scopes and turn that on, and you'll see something like this. Now, if you right click, you can turn on different things. Now, as a whole, your waveform will probably be the one thing that's showing. Now, a waveform monitor is great for showing you your RGB colour grade and also your white sections and your black sections. So what you want to aim to colour grade at is you want your white wave to be touching 0, and you want your top grades to be touching near 100. Everything at the second on my grade is sort of clamped into the middle, and that's good. That means that we've got data that can be stretched to 0 and also data that can be stretched to 100. So this is an ideal colour or profile to begin with. because of that. I'm going to turn on my Vectorscope YUV. Vectorscopes are ideal for showing you the center point is true white. So what you want to aim for is to have this like a little dot in the center, and that'll tell you that your color grade is perfect. This is actually telling me that my color grade is slightly blue, because you can see there's a little sort of ghosting going on in this area, tealy blue, also a little bit in the red and a bit in the yellow. So ideally I could change my temperature slightly, and if I change this, can you see how that alters my scope? If I go too far right, you can see it's going into the red zone because of course it's too orange. So I'm just going to try to just get this as centralized as possible. Maybe there, that looks good. Okay, looking at this image, it's slightly too underexposed. I could boost it a little bit. Good autosave. But we're not going to start with that yet. We're going to talk about more scopes. So this is a fantastic graph to have up, especially when you're colour grading. At the end of your colour grade, if you want it to look like a perfectly photographic example of reality, all of this would sort of have a big ghosting in the article, and it would all look very equal, and that just means that your colour grade is colourful and represents the colours in your image. If it's too far red, it's too warm; too far blue, it's too cold, etc, etc, you get it. So I can also turn on my histogram. I'm not going to talk about the histogram too much because I'm not really a fan of the histogram. Your parades, again, similar to your waveform. You ideally want your reds to be touching 100 and the bottom of your reds to be touching 0. And again, these are all sort of right in the middle, which means that I've got data which can be stretched. If your waveforms show that your reds are already off the spectrum and they're already off the spectrum at the bottom, that means that you've lost data. So again, when you're filming, you want to aim to have all of these centralized. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to start. Firstly, I want to just fiddle around with my exposure, get it a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to boost it really slightly. I don't want to go too far. That should be enough. I'm going to leave contrast, shadows and all this stuff for now. I'm just going to turn this off. So next, what I want to do is go over to, so you've got all these other extras. We're going to look at all these in more detail, but I'm just showing you how I would colour grade, the process I take. Ultimately, I want to start adding some colour. I want to start painting in what should be here. And to do that, I'm going to nip down to curves. And in your curves, you've got your colour grading graph here. Now, traditionally in Photoshop, if you wanted to boost the highlights and lower the contrast, you draw an S curve, and that would do something like this, which is lovely. And we'll do that later on, but for now I'm just going to keep this normal. Now what I want to do is actually start adding some saturation to my image. So there's colour data in here, but at the moment it's flattened. So I'm just going to grab here and pull out, and not to the max, but just a little bit. And what should happen then is a little bit of colour has been added. We're getting some more colour in there, and we can already see a lot of the detail we thought we didn't have is reappearing. So we're starting to look excellent. Right, that's it, we're done and we can go home. No, never that easy. So we're going to go back now, and I think potentially I might be a bit too bright now, so I'm going to just lower my exposure slightly, and I'm going to increase my contrast. I'm going to leave contrast actually, but I'm going to boost my highlights. So, and also lower my shadows slightly, and I'm going to leave these alone for now. I'm just going to increase saturation though, and this is where the beauty of a flat profile comes in. So watch this. If I just increase saturation very slightly, go all the way if I wanted to, but that's going to look too it's going to look too unreal. So I'm just going to boost it a little bit so it's in between too saturated or too oversaturated to sort of a nice balance. So already we're starting to get a good idea of what the scene looked like, and hopefully now you can see how your colour grading, you know, you're really sort of adding all of these colours and the dynamic to that. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to add some more in there. I think this looks good. I think this still looks too much like that could have been produced on camera. So what I'm going to do now is go over to colour wheels. Nope, secondary colour, HSL, and see what I can use in there. No, it's not in there. What am I looking for? I'm looking for vibrance, which is here. So going back to creative, the creative section, I could add some more saturation, but again, it starts to look a little bit too much like it's a toy. It's almost looking too cartoony. So I'm just going to reduce that again. But I am going to boost the vibrance. I find that vibrance being boosted slightly adds a bit more tone, but not in a kind of unrealistic fashion. Okay, I like that. So I'm going to go back over to basic correction, and I'm just going to start fiddling around with these sections here in the tones. So I'm going to, okay, I could lift my blacks, and as you can see there, what that's doing is it's taking out some of the shadow. This is quite a popular style at the moment. This is the Instagram look already, but I'm not a fan of the Instagram look, so I'm going to just go the opposite direction. It's going to drag in these, deepen these shadows a little bit, and boost my exposed areas, my whites. Not too much, but just to sort of, I'm bringing out this lens flare, which you can slightly see here. Okay, I like that. I'm going to keep that there. Now, I could have added a LUT, again, not in basic correction. If you go into creative, you do have more lookup tables this time. But traditionally, again, they just never look right to me. If I add this on here, you'll see what it does. That's gross. And again, I don't see the point in colour grading around a lookup table, which doesn't really, it's kind of, I don't know who creates them, but why. Again, that's nice. Looks like something out of The Walking Dead. It's their kind of look, that metallic look. Some do look quite interesting, but again, it's nothing that you can't make or create yourself. So I'm just going to keep that, the creative to look to none. Don't want the LUT to do anything. So now we're starting to, having a look at our vectors, we can start to see that this is starting to take shape quite nicely. The RGB is going across the spectrum well. We've got some bottoming out in the red zone, but not topping out, and these two are looking okay. What this is telling me then is that this is potentially now too warm. So if I go back to basic correction, just lower my tint ever so slightly, you can see how those vectors are starting to come back in. And I don't want to go too blue, so it's a real sort of balance, happy balance. If you go too far, again, we can make it look unusual. So think about here. And you'll notice I'm not trusting my eyes. Your eyes will reset as you're grading. What I am doing is trusting what my graphs are telling me. And that's the way you want to work while you're colour grading. Don't trust your eyes, they will reset to whatever it is that you're working on. So I'm quite happy with this. I think it does need a bit more contrast, so I'm just going to add a bit more contrast in here. And that's looking fantastic. Okay, so now it's feeling really sharp. The colours are popping. We've got a variation of greens occurring here. We've got some really beautiful architecture coming through here. The sky looks amazing. This lens flare starting to look fab. I'm really happy with that now. My computer's lagging. So going back to that lens flare, what a flare. Right, we're going to stick to here. Now, this is where we can start to actually start to do a secondary colour grade. So this is our look. This is how I want it to look. Now if you want to start adding a stylistic look to yours, earlier on you saw when I went into the creative section, I changed my vibrance and my saturation. Basic colour correction, I changed how the whites and black spectrum worked and created a sort of Instagram look. If you go to colour wheels, this is where you can really start to harness your colour grading. So just by looking at, we've got shadows, highlights and midtones. Just by changing the position of some of these midtones, you can see the midtones is anything that's not highlight and it's not a shadow. So midtones are pretty much the whole scene. just by changing it to a more orange colour, it gives me this interesting look. Now, if you do it too much, you're going to lose the effect. You're not going to be colour grading effectively, but changing it slightly, that looks interesting. And if I now pull my shadows in a similar way, maybe go more red with my shadows, I'm creating a kind of like an old filmic look, sepia almost. Now, if I go the opposite, so colours that don't usually complement each other, like midtones being orange and shadows being blue, you get this really interesting teal look, which again it's not uncomfortable to look at, it just adds an extra bit of interest and style to your piece. So my colours are still popping, but there's just something amiss with the midtones and shadows, and that's because I've changed the coloration of them. And I can do the same with the highlights, but I like to keep the highlights because when you do start messing with highlights, it becomes unusual in the blown out areas. This wouldn't affect it too much, but if you ever get a white blown out section on your film, it would look the colour that you set here. So if I go to there, nice sort of green colour, you can see that that looks quite nice. But again, we're just changing up our overall look. Now I'm losing a bit of detail on these colour wheels, so I'm just going to drag this out. Okay, so you can see how that's reacting. Too blue would make it look quite cold, but I quite like that. That's an interesting look. Okay, so let's see what we had to begin with. If I go back to my, where's it gone? So if I go back to my effect controls, click on there, so we bring it back. If I now turn off this effect, this is what we started with, and it's quite a shock. It's as if I've just made it black and white. And that's because our eyes have sort of adjusted to the colour that was there. So we can really see how we've played with the image. So this is just a quick example of how you can grade and stylize it yourself. You can obviously, whatever you're interested in, get a mood board together, try to find something which you like. I'm quite a fan of this look now, I quite like that. In fact, if we look at the original graded teaser that I did, hopefully I've graded it slightly different to what I did last year. Where are we? So we're looking for George's Wedding, and I've got a teaser graded. So let's play this and see what coloration I went for, what grade I went for back here. So in this graded version, I actually blew it out more than we have done in today's tutorial. I'm not really a fan of this grade now, but again, this was my feeling. I went for this last year. I think the reasons were I wanted to bring out more of the lens flare that was happening. But if we compare this to this is how working with a flat colour profile will help you. If I wanted to regrade this, we would lose quality here. We would have quality missing from these areas because they're too blown out. We'd also not be able to bring any of this detail back in the shadows. Now if I show you the shadows on our piece, it's here. It's almost like a different image. These are all returned and all of our sections here aren't blown out. And again, using our scopes, this is also showing us the same thing. So hopefully you found this enlightening, this tutorial on colour grading. Hopefully you want to now go out there and film something and bring it into the editing system to colour grade it yourself, and hopefully now all of these areas of the lumetri, colour, wheels and all the rest of it make a little bit more sense. It is about having to play around with things, but the key for me is start off with a bit of a correction. Don't go too wild in this section, just slightly adjust things, adjust tint, make sure that everything is matching up in your waveforms. And then once you've been here, head over to the curve section and boost your colours. You could then draw an S-curve. Let's see what that could do. So if I wanted to now maybe do like a final grade, so I boosted my highlights, deepened my shadows, that's what it would look like. Again, for me, I'm not really a fan of that. I'm quite happy with what we've created here. It's not too overexposed, it's not too highlighted, it's nice. It looks like an old posterized image, which I think suits the medieval church. So once you've done your curves, you can go back up to creative, start adding a bit more saturation. No, sorry, leave saturation, add a bit more vibrance. You can add more of these sharpening things, so you could sharpen your image even further. I dislike that. Look at all the grain that's created. You could even remove some of the sharpness. When you remove sharpness, it's creating a digital kind of blurry look. Not a fan of that. Don't know why they had that. Faded film look, so you could add, again, more of that Instagram filter coming through. You could reduce that slightly. In fact, you could add this, then go to curves, then add your S curve, slight S curve, and just bring that in. So again, there's so much that you could do with colour grading, but again, the focus being on the fact that we couldn't do any of this without a flat colour profile in the first place. So watch this over and over again, get used to these settings here, have a play with your colour grading, but most importantly, don't rely on LUTs. Be creative. Oh, that looks quite nice. But again, if the look can make it, I can make it. It's just about spending a bit more time and fiddling around with the bits that you've already played with. You'll be a lot more satisfied. Now, a quick section is also, if a lot of your scenes match each other, like-minded, because I filmed them on the same day, you can then, once you're happy with your lookup, with the colour grade you've done, you can actually copy your colour grade. So if I select luminatory colour here, Control C, and I was to bring in another scene, so this is a very similar time of day, bring this into the fold. If you bring in both, we only want to work with the video, so I'm just going to press Control L to unlink them, delete my audio, and then Control V on top of this, and it's brought in a similar colour grade, which again means that they've transitioned nicely on top of each other. And this looks great. I'm really loving this. Maybe this scene's a bit too blue now. I could add an extra bit of tint, go into our colour grade here and just boost that slightly. Then if you're not happy, if you get something like this that's a bit too green, but I like what's happening over here, this is a bit too green, what you can do then is go into curves, grab your green handle here and just pull it back ever so slightly, and that should take some of the drama out of that green, but as a result we're getting a bit of a purple hue. So that would then mean I need to go into blue and pull the blue back slightly, until you get something that you like.